Well, Nicole, guest session's over, huh? Time to talk about it. I can see you're very enthusiastic. Okay.
My favorite time of year, Adam.
That was a little bland. All right, let's try this again. All right, ready? Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adam Sultani.
Not on purpose.
It was not. Are you ready?
No.
This is great. This is exactly what we needed. Assalamu alaikum. CAIR Oklahoma Executive Director Adam Sultani here, and I have with me our Advocacy Coordinator, Nicole Bauman. Nicole, how are you doing today?
Great, Adam.
Wonderful. I'm sure you're doing even better now that legislative session is over.
Absolutely.
Well, tell the folks out there in YouTube land, or wherever you're watching from, why we're here today. What is it that you do as far as legislative session goes?
Yeah, with the Government Affairs Department, we create a list of bills to track. We'll watch the committee hearings, write about them, just to update the community and give them the tools they need to advocate either on behalf of these bills or against them whenever the time comes.
That's right. And you can go to cairoklahoma.com. We'll put that across the bottom of the screen, and you can see our legislative bill tracker. You can follow all the blog updates. I will tell you that this is not easy work, because Nicole and her interns and volunteers, they not only read the bills and monitor them, but they also watch all the committee meetings, all the floor hearings, which can become very exhausting throughout session. Isn't that right?
Absolutely.
So you can't do this work alone. It is a lot. So tell us about the people you work with, and in particular, some of the organizations in the community that join you in these efforts.
Yeah, so we're lucky to partner with a lot of different organizations throughout this session. So we work with the Oklahoma Policy Institute, the ACLU of Oklahoma, Let's Fix This, the Oklahoma Faith Network, and even with just local communities on the ground to help track these bills, show up to protest against them, and just get all of the aspects involved.
That's right. Let's Fix This. What an appropriate sounding name for a coalition of people who are trying to make the state better, because we have a lot we need to fix, but we'll get to that later. Each year's session seems to get more and more contentious, more stressful, and it seems like every year the legislative body as a whole, okay, and we know there's some good people there, we know there's some not so good people there, but as a whole, they are putting out laws or legislation that are negatively impacting other communities. How do people feel about this year's legislative session?
This year, many advocates felt that it was one of the worst years. They especially packed in a lot of the hate speech and just policies for political points at the very beginning of the year, which some of them did get pushed down at the beginning of the year, but then resurfaced again. So a lot about anti-immigration, freedom of expression, freedom of speech bills, and even some criminal justice reform bills that would go against the state question that people have already voted on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this year seems like the year of really attacking immigrants, which is very sad and very unfortunate. What was the biggest issue? If there was one singular issue that you could point out to people, what was the biggest issue that really stood out to you this session?
I think the biggest issue would be the anti-immigration bill that we saw at the very end of the year. So,
And what's that bill number? Do you happen to know?
House Bill 4156, which would create a new crime of impermissible occupation. It has a misdemeanor and a felony aspect, and would threaten the lives of thousands of people in the state.
Goodness. So House Bill 4156. So you can look that up. If you just Google Oklahoma House Bill 4156, all the information will come up. Now, I do know that there are several organizations or coalitions that have brought lawsuits against the state because of this House bill. So it will go into effect July 1st. However, that may not be a permanent thing. So stay tuned to our social media and our website for future updates. Part of CAIR Oklahoma's focus with our Government Affairs Department over the last 10 years has been building those bridges, right, between the Muslim community and our elected officials. And that requires that people from the community get involved. But the question is why? Why should, your everyday Muhammad or your everyday Fatima, why should they get involved in the government affairs work?
Especially at the state level, our state capital is supposed to be the people's house. So it's part of our job here to create that space for people to be in, to take up the space that they deserve. So one part of that is every year we have our Muslim Day at the Capitol, which we bring community members, give them the advocacy skills to either just talk about themselves, the community they're a part of, or a specific bill, to visit legislators' office, and just so that they can put a face to the name. A lot of rural areas, maybe they've never met a Muslim or they don't know anything about Islam. So it's our job to help get people to that building that is their house and then to show people who they are.
Absolutely. So you answered my next question, which is how people could get involved. And it's not just our Capitol Day, which happens every year during legislative session, but there are many opportunities to take action by joining our email list or following us on social media. And of course, if you want to do more, just reach out directly to our office. We'll put the contact information on the screen for you and find out how we can help you connect with your elected officials and make sure that your voice as a Muslim in Oklahoma is heard. What areas of policy do you focus on? Because when we're talking about policy, there's a lot of stuff. I'll never forget, many years ago, one of my friends who was serving in the Senate, he told me that the biggest policy issue during session, this is going back maybe 4 or 5 years, was wild hogs. I said, why? I don't know what that even means. He said, because there are so many rural areas of Oklahoma, they are concerned about the laws relating to wild hogs. So, what are the policy issues that you have been focusing on, especially this year?
Absolutely. So every year the legislature files several thousands of bills. It's impossible to follow all of them.
And you read all of those, don't you?
Yes. Every year we go through all of them and divide them into different categories, kind of on importance and what's most impactful for our community so that they'll stay more engaged. Because a lot of the rural issues are extremely important for our state's livelihood, but we can't do everything. So one main area that we focused on this year is anti-poverty justice issues. So in that, Oklahoma is one of 6 states that don't have any anti-retaliation laws for renters, which means if you file a complaint, either that's affecting your health or the safety of the building, the landlord can choose just to retaliate against you instead of fix this problem. We also have a huge shortage of affordable housing as well, so that has been one of our big focus areas this past session.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've already talked about immigration. How about on the issue of religious freedom and or civil rights? Because that's part of the core mission of CAIR Oklahoma. Were there any issues that people need to be aware of when it comes to those two areas?
Yes. So every year that's kind of a core tenet of our work here. This year, one bill that did luckily fail towards the end was Senate Bill 36, which would allow for school chaplains to become school counselors without any real paperwork process for that. And then another area more in the civil rights would be this past 2 sessions, they've filed bills about a counterterrorism fusion centers. So these have existed by executive order since 9/11 and have our intelligence gathering partnerships between the CIA, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, local police agencies, state police agencies to gather information on citizens accused of terrorism. And then probably one of the worst aspects of these organizations is that none of this information can be subpoenaed.
Oh my goodness. And yes, FBI, we have as an organization focused a lot on FBI overreach when it comes to the Muslim community. So anytime federal law enforcement agencies get involved in, violating or potentially violating our privacy and our rights, that's very concerning. And when we say FBI, we don't just mean friendly believer in Islam, we mean Federal Bureau of Investigation. So I had to throw a little humor in there. Criminal justice reform, that's always a hot topic in Oklahoma. And also one that people seem to have a lot of opinions about. So what was going on with criminal justice reform during this legislative session?
Yes. Sorry, I lost my notes.
Sorry, Nikki B lost her notes, but she's back. You can use my notes if you go ahead. Criminal justice reform.
So criminal justice reform actually towards the end of the session had a good turnaround. There were good and bad things, like every year, but a big win in the criminal justice reform area was Senate Bill 1835, which is a survivor justice bill focused on domestic violence. So it would provide retroactive help for people who have been incarcerated due to either like fighting back in a domestic violence situation or some aspect of that. So with evidence, it would be able to provide resentencing opportunities for these individuals who've been wrongfully incarcerated.
And there was a Senate bill as well impacting homelessness. Is that correct?
Yes. This one is on the bad side. So Senate Bill 1854 was filed through kind of a national org that has been spreading some of these more harmful bills across the nation. And it would create a crime for having a tent or kind of some kind of structure on state land. So it would be further criminalizing homelessness in a state where we already have a lack of affordable housing and a struggling social safety network.
Yeah, absolutely. Any policy, in my opinion, that negatively impacts those who are already struggling, such as the homeless population, is bad policy. And this just goes to reflect why it's so important that everyone gets involved in government affairs advocacy, because our elected officials need to hear your voices. If they're only hearing the voices of the people who are pushing for these types of bills to pass, then nothing will ever change. And so we need to always work to be the voice of reason. And as Muslims in Oklahoma, that is not just our civic duty, but that's also our spiritual duty. Now let's segue as we kind of close out talking about legislation and, bills and things like that. The topic of Israel and Palestine. As we know, since October 7th of 2023, there has been a huge uptick in violence and an ongoing global conflict and, of course, humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip that we are very concerned about as an organization. What legislation or legislative policy issues were going on in relation to that?
Absolutely. So there were two key aspects on the state level. They filed a resolution regarding Israel-Hamas that did not acknowledge anything about Gaza, Palestine, just encouraging further support of Israel and condemning Hamas.
Yeah, and that's one that is an organization that we actually spoke out against and tried to get legislators to understand why that would be offensive and hurtful to so many Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians in Oklahoma.
Yes. And then the one bill that's still floating around there, it's been sent to the governor, so we're asking people to call and ask him to veto it, is Senate Bill 729, which would create an office in Jerusalem, Palestine, about the Oklahoma-Israel Commission, which has been advertised to foster further economic connections, cultural connections with the state of Israel. And this is another bill that we've created materials and are encouraging people to speak out against.
Absolutely. One of the biggest issues is not just the verbal support, if you will, for the state of Israel and their actions, which are reflective of mass amounts of violence and genocide against the Palestinian people, but our concerns are also the financial investments that our state is making in the state of Israel. We know that our tax dollars have gone to purchase Israeli stocks and bonds, I believe, which is in the numbers of, I think $10-15 million. And then opening an office in Jerusalem would then also be investing financially in a nation that has, created havoc in the Middle East and is pretty much defined by a lot of entities as a settler colonialist nation, right? So that's where our concerns have been, and we have brought those concerns to elected officials, and we've asked you to do the same. So keep speaking up, keep speaking out, because we can't stop voicing our concerns until and unless people listen to us. Get off my soapbox. All right, after that. So as we finish up, legislative session is over, which kind of brings a sigh of relief for the elected officials and definitely for the public who is trying to keep up with all this information. What's next? What's next? Do we actually have time to catch our breath, or is there just more waiting for us around the corner that we need to be preparing for?
Yeah, there's no break here
No
in
break.
this department. And for many of the elected officials, there's not a break either. So June 18th are the state primary elections. So many legislative officials were still starting their campaigns and knocking doors while session was still ongoing. So there will be almost half of the seats in the State House Senate will be up for election, and many of these people are facing primaries in a couple of weeks as well.
That's right. The primary election is incredibly important. Now, keep in mind, this does not have any of the presidential candidates on it because the presidential preferential primary, which is hard to say, try saying that 3 times fast, already occurred. So this will all be local, state offices or county offices. So make sure June 18th that you show up, you vote, because the people we vote locally impact our local laws and sometimes even the federal issues. Our website will be having the primary candidate guide that will be available within the next probably few days, if not up already. So check cairoklahoma.com and you will see the 2024, I want to say 2018, I have no idea why, 2024 primary candidate guide, and you can learn about who is running for office in the area you live in. Okay, so election time is coming. What else? Anything else we need to be aware of? No, that was the end of the script, apparently. Okay, so in that case, thank you for joining us for our legislative session wrap-up. I hope you found this to be informative. However, we couldn't cover all the details of everything that happened this session. So again, go to cairoklahoma.com or follow us on our social media accounts to receive all our updates. And I hope you and your friends and all your family members will not only join us next year at our 11th Oklahoma Muslim Day at the Capitol, but will continue to engage with us so we can help you advocate for what's important for you and your family at the Oklahoma State Capitol building. For me and Nikki B, have a wonderful day.
What my name? What?
Beetlejuice. Your dress reminds me of Beetlejuice, and that, yeah, I don't know why. Beetlejuice. No?
Are you okay?
Not really. Something else, Ghazi, maybe? That wasn't too good?
Yeah.
No one knows Beetlejuice. I'm looking forward to the new Beetlejuice movie
You're
coming out.
old. That's an old movie.
Yeah, it is an old movie. Oh, well, there you go. Thanks. You know what, Nikki B? I was thinking that I could run for president. Could you imagine? Like Adam Sultani, the Prince of Swag, the Sultan of Oklahoma for President of the United States with Vice Presidential candidate Nikki B. We could do well together.
You'd have to come to the office for that, Adam.
Oh, no. I want to be a remote president, hybrid. I'll join the meetings via Zoom.
No Thunder games for the president.
Oh, come on now. That's a wrap.